Hello, and welcome again, or for the first time, to Explore Your Roots. Here, we go over an ancestor of mine, and maybe yours, and investigate their life to tell their story and legacy they left behind. Today's episode is going to focus on an ancestor of mine from my mom's side of the family named Christina Catarina Olsson Wahlstrom. So tune in to learn more as we walk through the facts and records. Okay, so to start, we really don't know too much about Christina and her life, as there are very few accounts of who she was and very few accounts of what she did. One picture of her does exist, and we have a few circumstantial details that help us understand perhaps a bit more. But when speculation does arrive, I will make sure to specify. So, Christina is my third great-grandmother, and my connection to her begins with me, and then goes through my mom, then her father, my grandpa Aegon, then through his father, John, then we go through his father, Victor, and then Victor's mother is Christina, who's the topic of our episode today. So Christina was born in Ogen over Järna, Sweden, on May 26, 1829. She was the second of 5 children born to Olaf Erson and Christina Nielsdotter. So after Christina's birth, we really just don't have too many records of her youth, or frankly anything for the next 30 years or so. But within those records from the latter years of her life, we can infer a few events that took place. So continuing on in the timeline of Christina's life, I think it is safe to say that she probably grew up around the same area and town where she was born, since her parents both lived and died in that area. When Christina entered adulthood, real mystery kind of enters in the records. We don't know too much, but we know that in 1844 she is listed as moving and now carried the name Christina Catarina Olsson, a name that followed on some subsequent records. This is a bit strange only because it is very common in Sweden to have patronymic surnames. Now, patronymic means a name derived from the father, so specifically for Swedish names, it would be the father's name plus son for a boy, or the father's name plus daughter for a girl. This also means that there isn't a single last name that is passed on for generations, but instead the surname will change every generation depending on the father's name. On a side note, this actually helps genealogy research. Anyway, Christina, being a daughter of Olaf, would have the last name Olafsson or Olsson, the latter of which she did carry and which shows up on some records. So it is a bit peculiar that she adopted the last name Wahlstrom. If you'd like to learn more about Swedish last names and how they're derived, I'll put a link below to a small cool article that goes into a bit more depth than I did. Moreover, what is more peculiar is that in this record of 1844, when she was only 15 years old, she is listed as being a worker's widow. This is quite mysterious because as of now, we have no information or documentation providing a marriage or really anything from her life at this period, so really more research is needed here. The next record we have of Christina is in 1850, when her first child, Carl Alfred, was born when she was 20 years old. Interestingly enough, his birth record states his father as being Oshand, which means unknown, so Carl took the last name Wahlstrom. Sometime probably around 1855 or 1856, Christina met her future husband Johann Magnus Johnson. Johann was a blacksmith by trade and was a really hard worker, and on the day after Christmas, December 26, 1857, they got married. Christina and Johann were probably courting sometime before their marriage because they actually started having children in 1856, 1 year before they were married. In total, Christina and Johann had 5 children, plus Christina's child Carl from an unknown previous relationship. So their children were Carl, the first that I spoke of, and he was born in 1850. Then Augusta was the first child they had together, born in 1856. The next child, Emma, was born in 1859. Then after came Johann, born in 1861. Then Eva in 1863. Then the last child, Victor, of whom I come through, was born in 1866. Later in life, Christina's husband Johan got a job working as a blacksmith in a porcelain factory in the town of Värmdö, so the family moved there and some of their children were born there. Sometime after that, they moved to the town of Gustavsberg. Christina lived long enough to see some of her children emigrate and not only leave the house but also leave the country. Her youngest son Victor, of whom I come through, actually emigrated to Brazil in 1890. At this time, the government had many programs that encouraged skilled tradesmen to emigrate and work in other countries. So, on the government's dime, Victor took his family and left. Some years later, however, Victor's wife and children came back to Sweden, and while Victor's wife went to work in the porcelain factory, Christina would watch over the kids. This was just before the turn of the century, when Christina was well into her 60s, but this neat little bit of information shows of her kindness and selflessness to others, especially since her daughter-in-law entrusted the care of her children to her and not to her own mother. I'm sure she probably loves spending time with her grandchildren as well. Christina's daughter Augusta never married and is listed as living with Christina and Johan on all of the Swedish household examination books, the last of which we have is from 1907. On May 16, 1910, we have recorded that Christina Catarina Olsson Wahlstrom passed away just days before her 81st birthday. Although not much information exists about Christina, I think there are some neat snippets from her life that we can extract information from. The biggest one to me, and I think the one that reveals the most about her character, is the small mention that we have that she took care of her grandchildren while her daughter-in-law worked in the porcelain factory. Christina, being in her 60s at the time, showed great care and selflessness and really showed that family was important to her. Hopefully you all enjoyed this episode, and if you did, feel free to like it and subscribe to us on YouTube and Apple Podcasts to learn more about interesting people and history.